Hi everyone, it's me. So this week I wanted to talk about 5 mistakes that I made when I moved to the UK. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alanna and I am originally from Ontario, Canada, but I have been living in Kent, England since 2015. So without further ado, let's go. Number 1, my first mistake with moving to the UK is I had unrealistic expectations for a job. Let me explain. So back in Canada, basically anytime I was offered a interview, I was always offered the job. So anytime I got myself into an interview, I could get myself a job. I felt really confident about my abilities to get a job. I was feeling pretty good. The last job I had in Canada, I was an executive assistant for a school board, essentially. So I was working at like a fairly high level. I was making great money. I had a lot of responsibility for my job. So I felt really confident that I could come to England and get, just an administrative job, maybe something equal or slightly less than what I was doing, but it wouldn't be that difficult because I've already done that. I had lots of experience doing that. It'll be a piece of cake. That was obviously wrong, of course. During my first week in England, I had 2 jobs lined up. I had wonderful interviews, I'll be honest. They were fantastic. And guess what? I was rejected for both. And that really hit me back a bit, if that makes sense. I had unrealistic expectations about working here in England, and that's one of the things that I would like to pass on to anybody else who wants to work abroad. Just because you have great experience, to be honest, I have a great resume, but that doesn't really matter because you don't have any experience in the country that you're moving to. So one of the people that called me back to say that I was rejected basically said that I had a great interview, that I had all the skills and things, but they decided to go with somebody who has English experience. Which makes sense. It sucks for me, but I get it. But when you're really young, I came over here when I was quite young and I just was a bit unrealistic. That's basically the point I'm trying to make. So if you do move over to England or to any foreign country, even if you're going from England to Canada, just be aware that just because you have a great CV doesn't always translate. Of course, that's different for different types of jobs. Maybe you're in a really specialized field, or you're considered like an expert in your particular area, or you're a worker in a shortage field that country really needs. Then fantastic. But for the rest of us that don't have any particular passion when it comes to a particular job field, I don't really care, to be honest. I don't have any inkling to be, this is not making sense. For the rest of us who just work regular jobs because we have to work, because we have to get paid to survive, and you're going to a foreign country, maybe you want to do an entry-level job, maybe you want to do admin, kind of like what I was doing, then just have realistic expectations before getting there. Of course, I was then given a job a couple weeks afterwards, so it wasn't the end of the world. I got a job in the end. But I think it would have really helped had I just been a bit more realistic going into it. Okay, so learn from my mistakes. The second mistake I made when moving to the UK is, at first, I made friends with foreigners. It makes sense in my mind, and I did it. So there's two things wrong with this, right? Okay, so you make friends with foreigners, which is fantastic because they know what you're going through. They are the only people that know what you're going through. So everybody kind of just latches on together, even if you're not from the same country, but you are an expat, an immigrant, whatever you want to say, you kind of come together because they understand what you're going through. Maybe they want to do touristy stuff and you need a buddy to do that with. It is a great idea at first. My problem was all the foreigners I made friends with were only staying in England for a short period of time, and then they were going back home. And I was still here. So the obvious problem is making friends with foreigners is great in the short term, but then of course if they move on, then you're basically having to start again. And of course you want to make friends with local people because you want to assimilate to the local culture as much as you can. However, I have found with English people, a lot of them have very specific friend groups. And I mean that in a lot of English people who have lived their whole life in one particular area have friends from when they were kids. And that is really hard to get into. So either they were friends when they were children, maybe they were friends in school, maybe they were friends in university, but they are long-term friendships. And as an expat, that can be really difficult to like insert yourself into, basically. But in the long run, if you just make friends with expats, they will potentially move on. And if you don't move on, then you are left friendless once again. Number 3, the third mistake I made when moving to the UK is I didn't really appreciate homesickness. So of course we know homesickness when you go someplace and you miss home, right? And that's kind of what I imagine it would be. I didn't realize how intense it can feel and how overwhelming it can feel, and it don't feel nice, okay? The other thing I didn't realize was, so I moved from Canada to England. I'm hanging out in England. I'm eventually starting to really, really like it. I go back home to visit family, and then I come back to England, and guess what? The homesickness starts over again, which I did not expect. I'm sure it's not the case for everybody, but I have noticed that in the first few years, when I would go away back home to Canada and then I would come back to England, the homesickness would start up all over again. Nice. So it's just something to keep in mind. I wish that I had a better understanding before I moved that that was going to be a thing. And I think if you recognize that it might happen, it just kind of makes it less scary, if that makes sense. Yeah, it sucks. The fourth mistake I made when moving to the UK is I didn't sign up either like to English Heritage or the National Trust. How do you say that? English Heritage or National Trust membership. So when I first moved here, I didn't realize it was a thing. But you can get memberships to these places and they give you basically free entry to certain like heritage locations around England and the UK, right? So I didn't know it existed. So when I first started doing the touristy stuff, I paid full price. And then I realized you could sign up to, say, English Heritage and you get free entry to these places. But because I had already gone to a handful of them, I thought, oh, I might as well not do it because I've already paid for these ones. But I really wish once I arrived and I was getting ready to do some touristy stuff, that I just paid for a membership because it really saves you a lot of money in the long run. Okay, so let's say English Heritage for a year subscription is £60, okay? £60. But it gets you into places like Stonehenge, which is £20, and Dover Castle, which is another £20. And I don't even think that includes parking. So if you don't have a membership, you might have to pay parking on top of that. Anyway, for just 2 places, you're almost covering the cost of the membership. So I wish I had just done it once I got here, rather than just paying full price to literally everything that I ever went to. So if you are coming to the UK or coming to England, check out English Heritage or the National Trust. I'll put links down below if you want to check them out. If you are moving, I would definitely recommend looking at getting a membership because it makes sense, okay? And number 5, the 5th mistake I made when moving to the UK is I didn't travel. I have always had a job, really. Ever since I got my first job when I was 16. I even worked when I went away to college. I was a tutor. The college paid me to tutor other kids. before I even graduated, I had like an adult grown-up job lined up. Then I went straight into that job. When that job wasn't working out, I found another job before quitting, so they both just like seamlessly went into each other, and I've just always been working. And so when I came to England, I jumped on, I need to find a job immediately. Like, I didn't take any real downtime. I didn't travel. I didn't really do anything. I was getting my CV out as much as possible. I needed the money to support myself. I don't have any like financial support from anybody. My parents don't pay my living costs or anything like that. So I needed the money to survive. But I probably could have gotten away with just taking things a bit slower, so I could really like get to know my new home. I could travel a lot before starting work, because obviously once you start work, you get into that routine and it's really hard to get out of. But I went straight into working, and I really wish that I had just taken the time to go a bit slower. So if you are moving to England or to the UK and you can swing it that you don't have to work immediately, maybe it's a good idea to just go slow. Even if you just take like a couple weeks, you travel around, maybe travel around England or the UK as a whole, or maybe do a little bit into Europe, whatever. You have that time where you're not working and you could travel. If you can swing it financially, I would definitely recommend it. It's something that I sort of regret not doing. I just went straight into having a job and getting into my like English life routine. And now that I've been here since 2015, I'm still in a similar routine. I'm still working. I've always worked being here in England, and I haven't taken the time to travel when I first got here, and I regret that. Even now, I have traveled around England and the UK and done a couple trips into Europe. Of course, everything costs money, so that is tricky, but it's harder to break out of your routine and travel than it is like to take a full break. You're not working, you've just moved, travel. Because when you get into the day-to-day routine, sometimes it can be really tricky to break out of that. So those are 5 mistakes that I made when I first moved to the UK, specifically from Ontario, Canada to Kent, England. I hope it helps. Sometimes it's helpful just to hear what other people have done wrong, and then you don't have to do that. If there's any expats out there, let me know if you have any questions, or any maybe new expats that have regrets. Share them. Let's share our regrets, shall we? As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, bye!